What's so special? It's a 40/30 special. What's a 40/30 special? It's 40% off Maxon One or 30% off any annual subscription. What can you do with Maxon One? Great question. All this stuff. What? 40% off Maxon One is a ridiculously low price for all the tools you get. Yeah, 30% off any annual subscription is pretty darn good too. So why is this special so special? Well, because it's the 2-year anniversary of the last time we had a May special. What? Remember when we regularly held a sales special in May, like every year? We didn't have a special last year. That's why we're especially excited to announce a very special to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of our May specials. I'm tired. How long is the special? 3 days. Great. And why are there 2 of me? I don't know.
What's up, everyone? How's it going? Happy Tuesday, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you're all from. It's good to see you all. Hey to those of you in the chat already who are here with us. So hey to Sibeli, Paula, Rushboard Technologies, Dances for Peas. How's it going? It's good to be here with you all in this lovely May Tuesday. So before we get into it, I just want to really quickly, those of you who just saw the previous clip about the 30/40 sale we have going on, I just want to really quickly talk about that. So for those of you who don't know, let me just get the page up. If it wants to open for me, here we go. So we have just announced this. So those of you who have been in the Maxon world for however many years, just like I have, will know that we used to run a special May sale. And then it got a little bit predictable. So then we stopped doing that. Well, a couple of days ago, we've announced that as of today, we are running a 3-day special for new annual subs and also new subs to the individual products. So all you have to do, head over to the Maxon.net events page. No, sorry, not the events page, just the normal page. And this should come up as the first news item where you'll be getting a pretty good discount, a pretty hefty discount. So 40% off new annual subs to Maxon One and 30% off new annual subs to the individual products. I really wanted to just talk about that just at the beginning while we all enter. And it's good to be back, Dances for Peas. Yeah, it feels like a while since I've been on a live stream. Also, you might hear I've got a little bit of a sore throat. I'm getting over the flu. So sorry if I sound a little bit croaky today for you all. Cool. So a couple of weeks ago, I posted on my socials ideas and suggestions for this particular May live stream. Because I thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different. Maybe normally what I do is I break down like a whole project from start to finish, which I'm definitely going to be doing over the next few months. But I thought, why not get some suggestions from you all as a lovely audience and see what I can answer during the next sort of like 60 to 90 minutes. And I got a lot of suggestions. So just to sort of have a little look in my notes here. Yeah, I got a lot of questions about UVing. So the UV process inside of C4D, texturing inside of Substance Painter, UV workflows, texture placement, a lot of that. And I love that topic. I think that's really great. And so my plan is next month's live stream, so June's live stream, I'm going to put together a whole project that actually dives a little bit deeper into like a UV workflow, maybe some like product visualization stuff, because that was another suggestion. So hopefully I can try and combine those and get a cool project together for next month. I did get a lot of questions on, or a lot of suggestions based on compositing and how we can put our AOVs, which are our render passes, together, and also how we can composite 3D elements into like live footage or into stills. Both of those were actually the previous 2 demystifying series. So those of you who kind of like follow the Maxon training team will know that every month we change the topic and we do a specific demystifying series, which is every Monday of that particular month. And yeah, those 2 topics are actually the ones that we've been covering. So if you head over to the Maxon training team YouTube channel and just go to live, there you can see us here. And so, yeah, this month, so during May, we've been looking at compositing 3D into videos and stills. And Lionel, Dustin, and Thanasis, or aka Noseman, have been covering a lot of those topics inside of there. So I'd seriously recommend checking those out. And then in April, Dustin and Lionel went through how we can make our 3D renders pop. And in particular, it was going through how we can get our AOVs out from C4D and Redshift, how we can composite those together in After Effects, and also how we can do some stuff inside of Photoshop as well. So definitely, if those were your suggestions, I'd seriously recommend checking out both of those previous 2 series. And then if not, feel free to come back with your questions. But there was a lot of questions I had on creating certain types of materials. So just to run through them really quickly, it was creating like a rainbow material, how we can do color transitions, how we can create beer foam, how we can create X-ray shaders or a hologram effect, how to add materials to volume builders, how to create gradients, materials with subsurface for like food, and then also, again, animated colors and textures. And I thought that's a really nice theme to cover all of those things in this one live stream. Well, I'm going to do my best to cover those things. How I think is a cool way of doing them. Like you will know, inside of Cinema 4D and Redshift, there are multiple ways of doing different things. So what I'm going to show you is just a way that I thought of. And hopefully it's going to help answer some of those questions. But again, we also have the little questions area. So if you have any things related to the stuff I'm talking about or materials in particular, then just drop them inside of here. Or if you have a good solution for the stuff that we're talking about, then definitely let me know. Cool, right, so what should we start with? Let's start with some subsurface scattering. So first off, if you saw the little hero image, which is sort of based on this here, I didn't model this. I just textured and lit this, but I downloaded it from Sketchfab for free. And so I just wanted to shout out the guy who created this. So on Sketchfab, it's Nesta Eric, and I actually found his ArtStation, so I can kind of like shout him out as well. He's the one that modeled this particular kind of piece of sushi. So yeah, check him out. And if you want to follow along, feel free to download that. So all I did was download that. I just set the scene up. I actually remeshed. So I used the Z remesher, just for those of you who haven't seen this. Remeshed the geometry, just so I had nice topology. And then I actually did some sculpting over the top of it. So just this little piece here, if I come out of my camera, I can show you this. End up sort of looking a bit like this, a bit more surface detail, just to try and add some realism. Really, I always try and make it look as realistic as possible, and I'm pretty happy with the result. I didn't spend too much time on it, which is like another plus, but it shows off subsurface scattering, which was one of the topics that was suggested, in particular along the lines of working with food. And the interesting thing about this is I used a little bit of like BodyPaint, which I've not really played around with too much before, but we can actually draw our own textures onto the surface of our models, and then we can use those in Redshift. And I'm a big advocate for working with blending masks. And so what I did was actually drew my blending mask, which created these inside lines, and I added a different texture to them. And so that's what we're going to look at today, and just see how we can do that. So maybe let's come back into here and let's turn a few things off, just so we can focus on the subsurface scattering side of things. So let's get rid of our chopsticks, and then maybe we can get rid of these and all of these. Cool. Also, I'm keeping an eye on your questions as well. And what I'll do after I've gone through this particular thing, I'll take a quick look at your questions, and then we'll see what we can answer. Okay, right. So let's just throw on a standard material on top of here. We get that nice, that default gray that we're all used to, just a standard Redshift material. And let's take a look at some subsurface. So subsurface scattering is the effect of when the light hits and enters the surface of our object. And then what happens is the light scatters around on the inside of our volume, which then creates that subsurface look. So what will happen is potentially on the thinner areas of our geometry, we then get that lighter, more transparent or thin effect. And what we can do, we can change some of the settings to control color, secondary color, which is like a subsurface radius, and that's the light on the inside as it comes back out. And then we can control the thickness of this as well. And it is so much easier to work with than the legacy way of working. So I'll quickly show you a comparison. So this is the standard material. So this is what we get. And we can find subsurface all the way down inside of our base properties here. And so we have some really nice options, and it's based on 3 main settings. So we have our subsurface color, which is this one here. We can define the color of our material and our subsurface. Weight value, just like anything else inside of Redshift, this is going to switch it on. So we're going to be able to enable subsurface if we have a value of anything over 0. Our radius is actually how we can control the light that exits our object again. And this is defined by our red, green, and blue rays. So we'll have a little look at that in just a sec. And then what we have finally is the scale. And this is the distance that our light is going to travel. So just as a comparison, I want to show you the previous way of working where we had slightly more what I would call like technical terminology and technical parameters. So we had things like attenuation, transmittance, absorption, and scatter coefficient. So you can see how much simpler these settings are in here. And it's going to allow us to create really easy subsurface materials with not a lot of sort of messing with settings that can be quite confusing, because I learned subsurface the other way, and it was challenging. Cool, so let's actually just start off with some subsurface. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to disable my diffuse because we don't need any of that. All my color is going to be controlled in my subsurface color. And then all I'm going to do is just switch my weight value to 1. Oh, I've changed it on the wrong material. Rookie mistake, don't add it to the backdrop. Cool, so let's come down and let's add some subsurface. And let me just go back, switch that backdrop back on. Okay, cool. So we can already see that we're getting that, or hopefully we can see we're getting that subsurface feel, that subsurface look. But now what do we want to change? Well, for me, because we're creating this piece of Toro, which I believe is like salmon or some kind of fish, we're going to choose a pinky color. So let's maybe go to something like this. Okay, and we're not really seeing much of the color. So we can see it just slightly here, which is potentially in the thicker areas of our volume, and also in the areas that's probably got less light focused on it, because these are the other 2 most important factors. So not only is it the subsurface material itself, but a lot of this is going to be based on the object size and scale, and also how much light we're going to have in our scene. So because subsurface is based on the light being absorbed and scattered inside the volume, we need to have the light to do that. And then the scale is important because this scale value here, which is how far the light is going to travel into our volume or into our object, we need to know how big our object is. And so this is based in the value of your DCC. For example, I'm in Cinema 4D and my measurements for these are centimeters. So this is 1 centimeter. The size of my little piece of sushi is 6 by 5 by 2. So we can see that just down here. So what that means is at the moment, this value of 1 centimeter is quite a high value, especially if it comes to me just wanting to create a piece of more realistic looking food. At the moment, it looks really thin and transparent, whereas we need to pull some of that color back and have effectively less subsurface. So let me not change the weight value. Let me change the scale value to something like 0.1. Okay, so now we're getting much less of that effect and it's starting to look a little bit better. So I'm not happy with the color. Actually, let me see if I can find a more accurate color. Maybe something like this. Okay, so a quick thing about the color is depending on how light or dark the color is also going to make a difference in how our subsurface looks and how thin or how thick the material is going to look. The darker, the more diffuse we're going to get, and the lighter, the more sort of transparent we're going to get. So at the moment, it's looking a little bit uncooked, but hey, we're getting there. So coming back down to these settings, we have an anisotropy setting. And what that means is it's when the light hits the surface of our volume, is it going to go forwards towards the light, back towards the light? And so what we can do, we can actually really change this look. If we do a negative value, we get what's called backward scattering. So as the light comes from the light source, it hits the object, it then goes back towards the light, and it actually creates a more diffuse look. So we can see here, we're getting a more diffuse feel here. And then we can do the opposite effect and do forward scattering by then doing a positive value. And you can see how we're increasing that subsurface effect. And what it's also doing is also desaturating our color. So we can see we're losing some of that color as well. This, I think I just went with a standard value of 0. Okay, so that would be the subsurface side of things. But now we want to add a little bit more realism. And so how can we do that? Well, I think, was it last month's stream or maybe the one before, we covered procedural texturing techniques inside of Redshift. And this is exactly what I did on this one, was I just took the color layer, and we can use the color layer to layer up different noises, different procedural techniques like curvature, and we can add those colors and those textures into this material. So let me, because I really like the colors that I had on the original. So this is the setup, and we'll talk through this in a sec. But I'm just going to still these colors because I really like them. I was pretty happy with them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set that as my base color. So I'm just going to paste that in there. So we have our base color. So what our color layer is going to do, it's going to control our subsurface color. Because we haven't got any diffuse, we have no diffuse going on. We're just going to add it to this input here. And what we can do, we can command click this little dot. So this little dot here, if we command click it, it's going to add that input onto our node, which is really nice and helpful. So we don't have to worry about right clicking and going through all of our different inputs here. So let's connect that to our, there we go, get rid of that. Cool, so all that's done is that's now controlling our subsurface color inside of here. So where I first chose that pink color, we're now replacing that with this color layer. And this color layer is going to allow me to combine and blend different colors based on different masks. And it's going to help add to that sense of realism. So what we can do, one one quick thing I want to sort of like detour slightly is we can use BodyPaint to create our own texture for this. And the way that I used it was I drew sort of like my own black and white mask or gray and white mask on the areas that I wanted to be a particular color. So when I looked at a photo of this, because that's how I try and create my materials, I have a look at photos and I try and recreate it as a like for like. They always have this slightly lighter color on this piece of sushi inside of here. And I thought about different ways of doing it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try a technique that I've never used before, never done before, because that's how we learn. And so let's just take this into a different scene. And I'm actually just going to remove these elements. So you can see how small this is. So just press the S key and it's going to zoom in and just show that selected object. And I'm going to show you how you can now paint and then draw your own textures using BodyPaint. And then I'm going to show you how we can then save that texture and use it as a mask inside of Redshift, which is exactly what I did on like the main scene. So let's go into our paint mode. And we're going to hit this little button here, this little button with like some stars on. And this is our BodyPaint 3D setup wizard. And what we can do, we have our selected objects, which in our case is just going to be the sushi, which is great because I just want the material and the texture to be on this. I'm going to go to next, and then it can recalculate our UVs and automatic packed UVs. That's fine. That's not a problem. And then we have our material options. So in here, we can choose the different options. I just want color because I'm only going to create a mask. And I can choose a dark color. We could do black, but I'm just going to do a dark gray because we can fix that later on. I'm going to go to finish. And this is going to take a little bit of time based on the resolution of your geometry. And so because I subdivided this quite a lot so I could add some surface detail with sculpting, then this might take a little bit of time. But while it's doing that, I can just sort of take a quick look at some of your questions. So just having a quick read through. It shouldn't take too long. Just reading a few of these. Okay, so just having a quick look at this question. On the Nike live stream a couple ago, I didn't get where the tiles came from because of my version of C4D. I need to create this one, but you easily found it. Okay, so I think you're referring to possibly the tile shader inside of Redshift. And so this came in, which version did this came in? This came in a couple of months ago in a previous version. So you will want to make sure that your C4D and your Redshift are as up to date as possible, just to make sure you have access to all of those different shaders that are coming in. And on this topic, I'm going to talk about some of the different stuff or the new stuff that's come out recently. So if that's what you're referring to, hopefully that helps. Yeah, just make sure you've updated and you should find the tile shader. But if not, just let me know. Cool. Right, so here we go. So this is now done. So we can close that. And what you'll notice is it's now turned that dark gray color. And I can now draw over the surface of it using my brush tool, which is this one here. So what's this done? Well, it's actually added a standard Cinema 4D material with this matte color texture here. And this is fine. This is perfect because all I'm going to be using is the texture. So we don't have loads and loads of options in sort of like our brush menu, or I don't have loads of options in my brush menu, but I just wanted to demonstrate how we can use this. And what I did was I ended up just sort of reducing a few of these options, like the size and the opacity, and then using this, I can just start to brush in. And what I'm doing, so I actually use a pen, but it works perfectly fine with a mouse. I wouldn't recommend a trackpad. I did try it, but no. So yeah, we just come and we can draw in these little lines inside of here. We can get in there, we can fix that. Cool, so I'm not going to do the whole thing, but it's just to give you an idea. We can do any kind of texturing on here that we want. So I could be like, hi, or I could do a little like smiley face. And then what we can do is we can save this texture on here and we can then apply it inside of Redshift. So let me just get rid of those so I can show you how, if let's say you've done all the stuff that you want to do, you've done these bits, these masks, we can then right click on our texture and then we go to save texture as, choose your file format, and then we're just going to hit OK, and then we can save that to our desktop. And then this comes in. So I'll show you the one that I originally created. Let's find our sushi mask. This one here. Okay, perfect, cool. So this is what it ends up saving, looking like. Sort of a little bit like a UV texture map layer. And what we can do, we can come back into here. I'm going to show you how you can apply this and use this now inside of Redshift. So let's go back into our material. And let's come back into, let's get our render view up so we can see this a little bit better. Cool. So what I did was I drew those lines in there again because I wanted to choose a specific color to go in those little areas. And I thought this was the fastest way of doing it. I could have maybe done it with like polygon selections, or maybe even a vertex map. But as I said, I wanted to try a slightly different workflow. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my inside color, which was a lighter version of my main color. So if you just click and drag your color from one thing to another, you can actually just duplicate that instead of copy and pasting. And then maybe we will, I've got my water in the way, move that out of the way. Let's maybe go a little pink and then slightly lighter. And at the moment, it's completely overlaid over my base color. And the reason for that is because I haven't defined any mask or any blending mode. So let's drag and drop that texture we just created. So those lines, and I can press the S key to solo it, and we should see what this looks like. There we go, perfect. And we can use this as our mask. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drop it into a ramp. And the reason for that is I want it to be almost 100% black and 100% white, just like we would have a layer mask inside of Photoshop. So maybe I need to pull in my blacks a little bit more. And then now I can use this as my layer 1 mask. And then let's just, and now hopefully, let's make this a little bit of a brighter color so you can see that. Now, hopefully you can see we're now getting those little areas inside of here where we've just drawn that mask being that secondary color. And I think that really adds to it. Like if you look at like a photograph of what this sushi would particularly look like, that little area in there really does make a difference. Cool. So from here, it's then just some of those same procedural material setups that we went through in a previous live stream. So we could take a curvature map, for example, and then we could make it a little bit smaller. Maybe go a bit smaller again. And then we can use this in the exact same way that we just used our mask. We could come in, we could add a secondary layer. We could then say, okay, let's make this a slightly darker color. And then our curvature can be used as our mask again. And don't forget to control your blending modes as well, just to make sure everything is getting added or overlaid or multiplied over the top. Cool, so this was my process behind how I created this particular texture. And I'm actually going to show you the final version just so I can, let's drop that onto here, just so I can explain everything. But it's pretty much the same things that we've just gone through and in a previous live stream. So if I head into my standard material, these are my base properties. This is where we define the subsurface. So again, we have no base. We have a little bit of reflection. I actually changed the reflection color to be a nice pinky color. And then in our subsurface, we have those exact same settings that we looked at before. And then this is connected into our color layer. So we can see we've got our 4 layers, our base layer, then layers 1, 2, and 3, all with just different complementary colors. And then we've got our lines, which is the lines we just set up. We then have what do we have in the second one? We then have our curvature, and then just a series of different Maxon noises. So I found for this one, Voronoi 1 creates like a nice cell pattern. And then I can just show you the rest of these. So yeah, a lot of it is pretty default settings for this. And I've got the same Maxon noises working in the color layer, as well as working as bump maps. So for anyone who doesn't know, we can actually combine and blend different bump textures together, or different normal textures. All we do is we set them up in the normal way. So in our case, we've got a Maxon noise, which connects to our bump map. We then define our height scale. And then inside, we have something called a bump blender. So we can just search for the bump blender node. And then we can layer up our different bump inputs. This works for bump textures or noises, and it also works for your normal maps as well. You can combine all of those in that same bump blender. And then we have a blend weight, which is going to blend between your different bumps. But if you want them to add together, so add on top of one another, just make sure you enable the additive mode, which is what I did inside of here. And then we create this really interesting looking noise and bump pattern across the surface. Cool. So that was that first question, which dives into a little bit of subsurface. As you can see, it's in comparison to how it was in the legacy material, it's really, really simple and quick to set up and to define pretty much just by using the color, which in our case is the color layer, and then the scale and the anisotropy if you did want to. Okay, cool. So let me just have a quick look at some of the questions. Is it better to do the masking? Okay, cool. So this is a great question. Is it better to do the masking with BodyPaint or using Vertex maps? This is, in my opinion, a personal preference. So later on in the stream, I'm going to show you how we can mask with Vertex maps for a variety of reasons. One being, if you have a procedural volume builder, we can now use Vertex maps on that. So I wouldn't have been able to do the BodyPaint workflow, I don't believe, because I think the object needs to be editable. So it will depend on what and how you're creating. But yeah, it's personal preference. I do a lot with Vertex maps. I also will be using this workflow as well, because I find it's really precise and I was able to exactly draw and paint my mask, whereas Vertex maps are a little bit harder to control unless I'm painting on it. But yeah, either or is our trainer answer. Slightly off topic, but I always love this question. In the future, will Redshift have a Toon cell shader like Arnold and Blender? Yes, you can actually go and find the public roadmap of Redshift. It is being worked on. It is something that is being discussed, and it is something that is in the roadmap and planned for the future. Yeah. So yes, I'm also a massive advocate for this, and yeah, pushing for this as well. But yeah, it's on the roadmap and that is public. If you just search Trello Redshift roadmap, you should be able to find that. Just going through a few more. Yeah. So this is what we're just saying. For that effects, I paint vertex maps to bring it into Redshift to keep procedural as possible without generating external files. Yes, absolutely. That is another reason why working with vertex maps is great, because we can keep things really procedural, especially now we can use them on parametric objects, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. So yeah, again, it's definitely different workflows and different processes to create a similar kind of effect. Just whatever works for you and your pipeline is great. Cool. So let me move on. There is one final question which I'm just going to highlight now. First off, thank you so much. I really appreciate the lovely comment. So for this particular question, I am going to do a tutorial or a stream on optimizing for faster renders in Redshift. Those of you that have seen my socials, I posted a quick side-by-side where I managed to cut down the render time by, I think it was like 60 or like 70%, just by adjusting some settings inside of the render settings. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be doing that very, very soon and giving some tips and some suggestions on how we can get faster renders outside of Redshift. Cool. So let's move on to another question. And so the next one was relating to, let me just check my notes here. Gradients. Creating gradients inside of Redshift. And this is a nice one. So let's maybe set up a slightly new scene here. Dive straight into Redshift, and then let's just load my render settings preset. So this preset, all it does is it changes my output to square, which when it comes to live streaming is nice because I can have my viewport and my render view side by side. And then the only thing it's changing is inside of my basic tab, my bucket quality is set to low. My passes are set to 128. These are my progressive passes. And the reason I do that is because then when I change things and I update my lighting, it updates way faster because we only have a short number of passes. So it does speed up the workflow. And if you've got like a high GPU, I'm on an M1 Max MacBook Pro, often you'll get that little alert that says, hey, you've got a lot of GPU, you can increase your bucket size. So we can just increase our bucket size to either 256 or 512 if we have that power. And again, that will speed things up as well. Okay, let's look at creating gradients and how we can do that inside of Redshift. We're going to start off with nice and simple. We're just going to create a plane. And then maybe we're going to throw in a dome light and just kick this off. Okay. Do we want a HDR mate there? No, we can just leave it as it is. Focus on the material for now. So let's double click, create a new material. I'm going to throw that onto our plane. So a variety of different ways of creating gradients, and it depends on what you want to do. Also depends on your geometry and your UVs. So we're going to look at a couple of different methods inside of here. So the quickest and easiest way of creating a gradient is to just grab ourselves a ramp node. And then what we can do is we can use this to control the base color of our standard material. So if we plug this in here, we can see that we're getting a black and white gradient already. Then we can come into our ramp and then we can choose just some colors for our gradients. Let's do a blue and a pink. So we can see we now have that gradient going along. But the thing here is this is just a simple plane. is a simple plane with a simple mapping type, which is set to vertical. We can set this to horizontal. We can see we get a horizontal gradient. We can set this to diagonal, radial, and then circular. So this is the quickest and the easiest way. But again, it really does depend on your geometry. And it may involve doing some UVing. So let's say, let's create a really simple shape here. Let's create a helix and make it a little bit smaller. And we're just going to sweep some geometry. So let's get a circle, drop that inside of here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And let's shrink this down. Okay, maybe something like this. So now, what if we wanted to add a gradient to this? Let's actually just grab a HDR. We all know my personal favorite, the GI empty room. Cool. So now if we drag and drop this onto our sweep, and let's maybe add a little cap to this. Okay, so we're kind of not really getting this right. So we're getting it on the main body of the sweep, but on the caps, we're getting some issues. And so even if we maybe went in and sort of said, oh, okay, well, what if we changed the map type? Again, we're not really getting a fix for this. So how would we do this? Well, this is where it would come to having to set up our UVs. And so I'm actually going to just current state to object this. And then let's hide this inside of here. There we go. So we've now got our sweep, and we can actually remove all of this stuff. Remove all this stuff off of it. And then we can go into our UV edit mode. And these are what our UVs look like. So I'm actually just going to delete it and delete my UVs. And I'm going to set UV from projection. And then I'm going to just go to automatic UV down the bottom. And I'm going to hit apply. And now we can see we've got our UVs. So sometimes it's as simple as that when it comes to UVing. And this is the workflow that I like, is when it's nice and simple. Okay, cool. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to kick off my IPR. And let's come back into my material. And let's set this to horizontal. All right, cool. So now with a horizontal, sorry, just a quick question that came in is this one. So inside of your UV edit mode, you can then go to automatic UV. So I'd quickly answer that one whilst we're there and we're in the UV editor. Okay, cool. So now what I've done is I've changed my ramp to map type horizontal. And so here we can see we're getting a closer result, but you will see on this little cap here, we're not getting the color that we would hope. And the reason for this is our mapping, which is going horizontal, is going to go from left to right based on those colors. And so what we need to do is we just need to grab this. So we can see we've now selected that bottom cap, that bottom face. And then the way that you can move your UV islands or your areas inside of this square, you can actually click this button, which is going to allow us to move, scale, and rotate this particular thing. We can't use these ones. So if we click that, and then keep an eye on this color as I move this over. So as I'm moving it over, we can see we're getting the different colors of that gradient. And now we're getting exactly what we need. So Nick covered this on one of his amazing quick tips on the GSG YouTube channel. And so he goes into a lot more detail about this on using like grayscale gorilla materials. But this is a really quick and simple version. If you're working with a gradient and you're not getting it to map correctly, then chances are you might need to just sort out the UVs just to make sure the UV islands are matching your gradient projection. All right, cool. So let's come back into here and let's take a look at a slightly different option when it comes to working with gradients. And this is working with the state node. So what could we do for this? Let's take a landscape and let's get rid of our sweep. Okay, here we go. There we go. Cool. So we have our landscape and let's just make this a little bit higher just so we've got some nice, some cool height going on. And then we're going to bring back our Redshift render view. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually take the state node, which gives us different aspects of shading. So let's just sort of create a material and throw that on there. And let's just grab the state node. So we can see we have loads of different output options, and these are all different shading effects or shading types. For us, we just want to look at the normal, because what our normals do is they look at the X, Y, and Z axes. And so what we can do is we can actually split out those different axes, and then we can create a gradient based off of that particular kind of direction. So what we need to do is we need to grab a color splitter, and this is going to allow us to split out our red, green, blue, or alpha directions by plugging our normal into here. And then just for the sake of this, I'm going to put it inside of the base color just so we can see what it looks like. So if I get my red, we can see that this is going along my x-axis, so my red axis. We then have the green, which is the y, so up and down. And then we also have the blue, which is the z. So we can see it's coming sort of like towards us. And we can use this to then create a more interesting looking gradient over maybe more advanced models that, again, doesn't necessarily involve you having to UV. So let's say we want to use the green. And then we want to take a ramp, because our ramp is going to allow us to remap the gradient. So remap the black and white knots and also recolor. So let's again just choose these colors. So we're going to choose a blue, and then we're going to choose a pink. And as I pull these handles down, you can see that we're now getting a more interesting gradient, but it's based off of the normals. And so this could be a more kind of like interesting way of creating a gradient. One final thing, and this is sort of going to lead us into then animating textures, is we've talked a little bit about vertex maps. So we could also use a vertex map to not only work as a mask, but work as a way of creating a gradient based on, let's say, a field, for example. So the way that we can do that is on my landscape, I'm just going to add a vertex map. And then we'll keep it nice and simple. We're just going to choose a linear field, and then maybe we'll go something like this. So this is we're seeing our vertex weight values here. So we're going from 0%, which is red, to a 100% value. And then when we use this vertex map inside of Redshift, we can then use this weight as a gradient. And again, we can then colorize it and tweak it. So we've got our linear field and we've got our vertex map. So inside of here, this is our vertex map, let's say gradient. And we can add another new material. And then what we're going to do is the way that you can bring vertex maps into Redshift to use their information and use their data is something called a vertex attribute node. And what's nice about this is it's super simple. It just asks for the attribute, and the attribute is our vertex map. So we can drag and drop that inside of here. And then if I solo this, we can now see we're getting a black and white gradient based off of that vertex map. So again, let's just recolor this. So far, all we've been doing is we've been changing the color of our gradients. We haven't been changing the materials. But this is something we can do in just a little bit. So let's just load in what's like a cool one. That's a pretty cool one. So here we're using our vertex attribute inside of our ramp to recolor our base color. But the cool thing about this is because it's based on a vertex map, which is based on a linear field, I can then start to play around and look to animate my materials using this kind of workflow. And this leads us nicely into the next setup, which was creating transitions or animating our textures. And vertex maps are a great place or a great kind of like workflow when it comes to animating and creating our own interesting materials and textures. Cool. So really quickly, I'm just going to have a quick dive into the questions just before we kind of move on. If anyone has any questions on gradients, then just let us know. Also, hey to Desmond and hey to Yar BG. Good morning, afternoon, or night. So it's afternoon for me. Let's just have a quick dive in. Okay. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting question. Yes, you can. And it sort of relates to what we're doing now. So can you mix two different subsurface shaders with different densities? For example, for an orange juice where the denser subsurface in the bottom and the lighter is on the top. Yes, so there could be different ways actually of doing that. So what would be an interesting thing to create to show that with? Let's have a quick look. Let's maybe get rid of our landscape. You know what? Let's do this with a bunch of spheres just so we can show this. Because I'm also going to, this is a similar method to the volume builder. So I can just steal this same setup. Let's go into there and let's go into here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to create a strange looking object to then answer this with, or hopefully answer this with. We shall see. That's the fun of doing it all live. You never know. Okay, so let's add some random scale. And then let's volume builder this and volume measure this. Yeah, that should be fine. Maybe we'll pull everything a little bit closer together. Okay, right, let's delete everything else that we don't need. And let's maybe move it a bit closer again. And then in here, I just want like a really strange looking shape that I can then show some different textures on. Okay, cool. Let's go with that then. So the question was, can you mix two different subsurface shaders with different densities? For example, an orange juice with a denser subsurface on the bottom and a lighter subsurface is on the top. So let's think about how I'm going to do it. Let's see if I can do it from left to right. So my thinking is we could probably use a vertex map and then have the two different materials. So one that is the denser and one that is the less dense. And then we can use the vertex map as the mask, the blending between them both. So let's see what that does. Let's see if that works. Okay, cool. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set up my vertex map. I'm going to hide this for now. I think we all kind of know where we're at with that question. So what I'm going to do is, for those of you who don't know, I would say this is a new-ish feature that came out in one of the recent releases. They all blend into one, unfortunately for me, but I think it was like one of the previous C4D releases where you can now apply vertex maps and polygon selections to generators or parametric objects. So they don't have to be made editable. So in our case, on this volume measure, we can right-click and we can add a vertex map. We can use fields and we can grab a linear field. What do we want to do? Let's something like this. Cool. So this vertex map can then be used as my mask or my blend between our two subsurface materials. So again, let's just throw that on our volume measure. And the first is going to be, let's set up some subsurface here. So weight value of 1. Okay. And then what scale we got? We're working at quite a high scale. So maybe we can do, let's define a color. So maybe we'll go and do like an orange. Okay. And then maybe do I go higher on that? So let's maybe go really high. Let's try that again and enter a value of 50. My enter button is stopped working. Not good timing. Okay, cool. So we've got there. I'm just going to have to click off of it because apparently the enter has decided to stop working. So this is going to be maybe our more like transparent or a thinner, less dense subsurface. And then we can copy and paste this node. So let's get rid of that and get rid of that. And we've got this one. Perfect. Okay, back. Cool. And this is going to be our more dense. So let's go back into our subsurface. And then let's just change this to a value of 1. So we can now see we have our more dense subsurface. Then what we want to do is let's make some more room so we can all see what's going on. We can then take a material blender. So this is different to our color layer. So our color layer is just allowing us to multiply and blend different colors together based on masks. And that will then be used as a whole, like a whole kind of diffuse texture map inside of the base color. What the material blender allows us to do is it allows us to blend between different entire material setups. So for example, we have our standard material here, which is our less dense subsurface. So less, and this is our this is my Redshift's being a little bit strange for me today. Let's try that again. It always happens live. Okay, So let me just switch that off. Let me save this just in case we need to do a quick shutdown. So this is our, bear with me 1 second. I'm having a little bit of an issue. Okay, let's try again. File, save. Okay, that has worked. Let's bring you guys back so I can see you. Here we go. And then what else do I need? This. Okay, round 2. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, but normally what should happen is I should be allowed to make a little branch here. So let me just close this down. And then we're going to reopen because sometimes that's what you need to do. So bear with everyone. Hopefully this shouldn't take too long. Hey to Seymour, hey to Hot Zen Monster. I need to restart. I definitely do need to restart. Yep. So yeah. As TJ said, these things happen. We have to restart sometimes. And yeah, of course it happens during a live stream. Cool. Let's try this again. So let's reopen our little subsurface project and open our render view. The moment of truth. Do we? Yay! Yay! See, restarting always fixes everything. Cool. So going back to this setup. Sorry about that, everyone. It's not ideal, I know. So what our material blender is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to blend between different entire sets of materials. So in our case, we have the less dense subsurface and we have the more dense subsurface. And what we're going to do, we're going to connect these just into our base material and our layer 1. And I'm going to plug that into my surface. Then we can take that vertex map that we just set up on our volume mesher, which looks something like this. And then we're going to put our output color into our blending mode. And hopefully you can see, do you know what? I'm going to change the colors just to make it really obvious, but I can see the density change here. So let me just come in subsurface and then let's make this like a pinkier version so you can all see. That's the way that we would, so this was related to a question that was up here about mixing 2 different subsurface shaders. So this is the way you would do that. You would use your material blender and then you would set up the different base properties in your different standard materials. And then you could use a vertex map with some kind of field in this case, and probably in your case, you would use a linear field on the y-axis, and that would then work to change the 2 densities. Cool. So coming back in, let's have a little look at some more animating some materials a little bit more. So let's do it on this. Let's just do it on this one. Why not? So what we can do is again, using vertex maps, we can then take advantage of all the cool stuff that we can do with them. For example, creating cool growth effects with interesting sort of random field noise over the top. And then we can take those back inside of that previous setup, set up some cool looking materials, and then our growth is going to work as masking between our different textures. So actually, let's first of all, let's set up our vertex map. So just for the sake of everything being a little bit quicker. I mean, this shouldn't be too bad. Let's go 4. And yeah, so the resolution is fine. And then what we can do is we can throw in our vertex map. And then we can grab a spherical field. And then let's say maybe our spherical field, we want to just throw on the end. And this is where our growth is going to start from. So our animated growth is going to begin from here. And then we're going to throw in a freeze. So a freeze layer. And if we set this to grow, what we can do is we can set up this animation. We need a few more frames here. There we go. And we can see we're now creating that really quick and easy vertex map growth. Then what we can do, we can add some more like interesting elements by taking a random field and making it a child of that radius. And then we can increase or decrease this. And we can see that we're getting a slightly more interesting looking growth now. Something a bit like that. And then we can take this and we can use it to animate transitions inside of our Redshift material. So we can throw our volume onto there, and let's do, what should we do? Let's do maybe a glossy white and a gold, because we like a nice gold, don't we? Cool. So increase my metalness just to create that metal material, and then find a gold looking color. And then maybe we can increase that. So we've got like a brushed gold, and now we've got this glossy white. And so again, just like the setup we just did, we can grab the material blender, assign our different materials. And so we're not limited to 2 materials. So even though I'm only working with 2 materials here and 1 mask or vertex map, we can apply up to, is it 6? Yeah, so up to 6, including the base color. So technically 7 different materials with different masks. And then we need to grab our vertex attribute. Make sure we add our vertex map inside of there, and then add our blend color in here. And then as I play this through, so what we can do is just play that through, and we can then see we're getting that transition in between. Let me just remove that for now. And we can see that we're getting that transition now between our different materials. And the reason that this is so interesting is because we can then, because these aren't just colors, these are entire materials, I can change all the different attributes, and I can build up a really interesting looking material and have it blend between another completely different interesting looking material. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say on my gold material, I wanted to have some surface detail. So for that, I'm going to grab Maxon noise. Maybe we'll make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to connect that into my bump. And then the bump into here. And what this has done is this is only applied, let's maybe go a little bit smaller. This is only applying it to the gold material because we have those separate materials now that we're blending between. And so this is how we would create animated transitions, would be using the vertex map, creating that growth, so which we did inside of here. And then we use that inside of a material blender. And then we can set up, as I said, as many materials or as many vertex maps as we want to create some cool looking effects. And so this is sort of related to, this kind of shows the answer to another question that came in, which was how do we texture complex volume builders. And without knowing the complexity of the volume builder, it's kind of hard to answer, but I would do it in the same way, or at least at the moment, the only way that we can do it with enough control whilst also keeping everything procedural. And what I mean by that is at the moment, we can see we have our sphere, our cloner, our volume builder, and our mesher all as parametric, and they're generators. So I haven't had to make them editable at all to do any of this stuff. And so if we want to keep that workflow, then at the moment, the only way to really adjust the colors would be this method by setting up your different vertex maps. So we can take it a little bit step further. So let's say this is your complex volume builder, which I am 100% aware that it is not a complex volume builder, but the process will be the same based on whatever you're creating. And so for that, what we'd do, if we wanted to have different materials and different textures on different areas, we would have to set up multiple vertex maps for each one. So what I mean by that is we wouldn't just be able to have a single vertex map, because that's only going to get us from one color to one color, or one material to one material. So this is going to be vertex map 01. And inside of my fields, let's grab, I don't know, like a spherical field. And then let's have like this area can be defined by this field. And then what I would do is I'd just copy and paste or click and drag command. We can do vertex map 2. And this one could be a torus field. And then we can increase our thickness. So now we have vertex map 1 and vertex map 2. And so this is how I would do it on a complex volume builder. I would set up a different vertex map for each of the individual areas. Or let's say you had, I don't know, like a character or a creature, like let's just to feature my little Pikachu. And let's say this we'd made inside of a volume builder. What I could then do, I could then add a vertex map to each of the individual areas that I want applied a different material to, and then I'd use this workflow. So this is where it can come in handy. And let's maybe just do one final material. And again, it's the same workflow, but we can just combine multiple vertex maps. So let's do a standard material, and let's do a standard material. Let's just give us a little bit more room. Grab our blender, drop that in, and then just for the sake of this, I'm just going to change them to be just some standard colors. And then that can be maybe, I don't know, like a white. Connect them together, and then we can command click our material and blend color. And then we want to take our 2 vertex maps this time. Vertex attribute. And this is going to be the first vertex map, and this is going to be the second vertex map. So this is how we do it with a more complex setup with more vertex maps. And then that's not super interesting. So let's maybe make that yellow. So this is how you do it on a more complex setup. You would set up vertex maps and field for your individual areas, all as a different one, and they all need to be renamed. So this is really important. You need to make sure you're renaming your vertex maps, because inside the vertex attribute, it is name-based. And as Igor is saying, you can also use the objects in the volume builder as fields to drive different materials per object. So yes, that is true as well. So what you do, as he's saying, is you would drag the object inside of here, and that would work to define those particular objects that you have, which is another great way of working. Thanks, Igor. Cool. Right. So let's take a quick look. Where are we at? We're at 5:15. Okay, cool. So one other thing I want to talk about on animated materials is a new feature. So previously, But with standard Cinema 4D, we're able to loop Maxon noises, which is a great, powerful way of working, because noises alone are just extremely powerful algorithms to create really interesting effects, whether it's changes in colors or changes in like bump or detail or displacement. Well, as of last week, I believe, there is the version Redshift 3.5.15, and this comes with the ability to loop Maxon noises. So just to show that really quickly and how we can set that up is how you would normally add a Maxon noise. And we could create a slightly more interesting look. So maybe we go to a Voronoi, and then let's down inside of animation. Let me just move my water out the way because I can't see. Let's scale this up a little bit. Now what we can do is we have the ability to control the speed and the loop period. So the speed is the rate in which it's going to, how fast the noise is going to animate in cycles per second. And then the loop period defines how often the animated noise loops in seconds. So if I set this to a loop period of 1, what that means is, because my project is set to 30 frames per second, every 30 frames it's going to loop. And so we can set a speed of 1, and then if I play this through, so it's a little bit fast. Let's maybe say every 3 seconds. So at 190, no, let's go to 90. To 90 frames, this now should loop perfectly. And so this is really, really great because it's something that we haven't had access to before inside of Redshift. We can now animate these noises, which means we can animate our bump or surface textures. So we can drop this inside of our bump map, inside of here and inside of here. And then let's make it a little bit more exaggerated. And now hopefully we can see, maybe we can make this a little bit more of a color, maybe more prominent, that we're getting that looping noise now happen. And earlier, I did see a question about the new distorter shader, or the new distorter node. I don't want to spend too much time flicking back through, but I'm pretty sure I did see it. I haven't played with it too much, but I can show it. We can demo it. So what we can do is, let's see, we can take the distorter. Again, this came in with the Maxon looping noises, so you will need to make sure you're on the most up-to-date version of C4D and Redshift. So in my sort of like very limited knowledge of it at the moment, we're able to use something in the distorter option, so in here, which is going to work to distort a particular texture. And so the simplest way I can probably demonstrate this is by taking a Maxon noise, and this is going to work as our distorter. Let's maybe find something that looks quite cool. Maybe we can go to like wavy oh yeah, wavy turbulence is always a good one, isn't it? Maybe make this a little bit bigger. And then we can take, let's say we had a texture for this, as we're on the theme of gradients today, we can take our ramp gradient and maybe make it horizontal. And then let's choose a cool preset again. So let's maybe put that in here and then put that in here. Okay, so then what we can do is we can connect this to our distorter, and then our ramp to our texture. And then now we're able to distort based on directional or bidirectional, or what's called a flow field, our ramp or our texture with our Maxon noise. And we can choose the amount that we want this to distort. So we can see we can increase this, and we can get some pretty cool looking results on the X and the Y, which for our textures is going to be our U and our V. But what I thought was really cool about this is if you then combine it with the animating or the looping of the Maxon noise, we can start to create. So we can't do wavy turbulence. Let's see if we can find. So it doesn't work. Looping noises doesn't work on everything. I think there's like 3 that it doesn't work on. So let's. This one looks pretty cool. So maybe we're going to go to a speed of 0.2 and a looping period of 3 seconds. And then now, as our Maxon noise is looping, it's now animating the distortion on our ramp, on our texture. So yeah, definitely I'm going to be having even more of a play with this distorter soon. But that was just really quickly, because I'm pretty sure I did see someone comment on that. So we can plug that into our base, and then we can have a pretty cool looking material, which then animates. Okay, cool. So I did want to get to a couple of the other suggestions, which was one really fast one is actually creating an X-ray or like a hologram shader. So let's just really quickly do that, because it's going to be really, really quick. So let me just close that. No, I don't want to save any of that. And then let's start again. So let's cut into Redshift and then go to my RS start. And I'm just going to do this on the headphone. If I could spell, that would be cool. Oh, here we go. So let's go to the headphone model. Is it that one there? Yeah, perfect. Just because it looks like it's cool geometry. And so this X-ray shader is going to look way cooler on cool geometry. Perfect. Just seen that from you, Ali. Hopefully that helped. Sorry, it wasn't like a super in-depth. I'm going to do a quick tip on the distorter shader when I get my head a bit more around it. But hopefully that shows it just a little bit for you. Little teaser. Cool. So I'm going to collect objects and delete. And I'm not even bothered about these materials. Let's get rid of them. And we can get rid of all of that and all of that and that. Cool. So we have our single object. Bear in mind, that isn't important to the shader. I just wanted to do that just for convenience. So I can create one material and throw it on. Okay, let's grab our dome light. And then, of course, we're grabbing our HDR image. Cool. So let's kick this off and let's create hopefully a cool X-ray shader. So new material, throw that on your object. And as I said, this is going to be super, super simple. You're going to be like, what? And the way we're going to do it is by using the Fresnel shader. And so if we're solo my Fresnel, we can see we get this really nice fall off effect. So we get this really nice black and white gradient. Gradients has been like the buzzword for today. If you've got it on your bingo card, check it off. And so what we can do is we can use this Fresnel to control the opacity, but we're still then going to get that outside edge. This is going to be perfect for creating that X-ray style shader. But what I like to do, I like actually to disable this use index of refraction, because then we have full control of the curve fall off. So we can now really just like creatively, based on what we think looks good, control this without having to worry about understanding the index of refraction. Of course, if you want to, then by all means you can use that, and then you can change your index of refraction, and then you'll get the Fresnel based on that accurate IOR. So those are the two different ways that you could do that. But for me, I do like the control that I have here. And then what we can do is we can connect this to our opacity. And then we're pretty much getting that X-ray shader. So let's maybe make it, I don't know, what's like a cool X-ray color? Like a blue, perhaps? So we have this, and we can see that we can increase or decrease this to maybe bring some more of that opacity back. And so this is how I would go about creating a really like quick and easy shader. And we could even, so in this case, actually, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get rid of my diffuse, and I'm going to put it into my emission. Yeah. Cool. And then maybe we can bring that back to 3. So now we're getting more of that X-ray look. And another thing we can do to combine with this is there is a wireframe node inside of Redshift, which is going to give us the wireframe of our model. So I like to uncheck show hidden edges, just so we get a little bit more of a cleaner wireframe. And then we have our wire thickness. So we can have really thin or really thick looking wires. So maybe we go 0.3. 0.3 could work. And then again, in the same way that we use this in the opacity, we can use the wireframe in our opacity. However, we do need to actually swap these around. So if I change that to black and change that to white, we now get that cool wireframe. And so if we're talking about like that FUI or all those like cool things we see in like, I don't know, like the Marvel films or whatever, this is how we can create that effect really, really quickly and really easily using just 2 nodes inside of Redshift. And then why not? If we think, hey, I like the wireframe, but I also really like that Fresnel look, but you've only got one opacity input. Well, don't worry, because using our color layer, we can actually combine these. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Do we choose add? Okay. So we can then choose our blending mode of choice to then create a interesting looking X-ray shader. And then all we have to do is change the color inside of here. If we then want it to be, I don't know, like a pink X-ray. Oh, sorry, not in here. Inside of our emission, we can change this to then be pink. And now we have a really quick and easy X-ray shader that we could just throw onto any object. And then the only things we may need to adjust is just the curve fall off inside of here. So maybe we can bring that back and create quite a cool X-ray result. So hopefully that answers that question as well. Cool. Right. Okay. So let's have. I'm gonna have a quick look through some of the questions. So yep, looping noise is very good, isn't it? How to convert standard materials to Redshift materials. Okay, this is a great question. Let me just pop this one up here. This is a great question. It's one I get asked quite frequently. And in true trader fashion, the answer is it depends. So let's see if I can find I don't want to be in Redshift. I want to be in standard. Let's see if I can find a standard material and maybe create. Let's have a look. Let's see what we've got in here. So I don't want a Redshift material. I just want a normal one. What's going to be something cool? Maybe not fabric. Okay, no, maybe we'll go with the fabric. let's open up a couple. So maybe we go get this flannel, download this asset, and then maybe we can download like this asset, and then we can see. Okay, cool. So these are standard Cinema 4D materials. These are not Redshift materials. We can open them up and we can see that we have our different channels and we have our different layers. When it comes to converting standard materials to Redshift materials, unfortunately, at the moment, Redshift is unable to see the layers. And what I mean by that is we can see that in my reflectance channel, I have layer 1 and layer 2. Redshift isn't able to see those. Therefore, when it comes to converting, it's not going to do the conversion process properly because it can't separate out those different layers. So if your materials are created in the reflectance workflow, which is the PBR workflow, then the likelihood is the conversion process isn't going to work properly until it's able to actually determine the different layers. However, if your material is created, this one, it also isn't, but if it was created using the color workflow, let's see if I can really quickly find a material that uses the color workflow. Okay, no. If anyone knows one off the top of their head, that would be wonderful. Maybe try asphalt. Okay, right. I'm giving up. Basically, if there was a material that was created with the color workflow, so what we mean by that is inside of the color channel here, we have our texture or we have our diffuse. We then have just a single layer or a single like specular inside of our reflectance. And then we have our individual textures in either our bump or our normal or our separate channels. Then the conversion process is going to work properly. And then we can convert through. If we then change to Redshift, we should be able to, this is testing me now, tools, convert and replace materials, or convert and replace materials to node. These are the options that you would need to then complete that conversion process. But again, it does depend on how your material is originally set up. Okay, another quick question. Thanks for joining the live stream then. I very much appreciate it. So how do you set up a backplate in Redshift so you can match 3D objects to footage in C4D and Redshift? So that can be done inside of the Redshift camera. So what we do, we have a background option. And so all you need to do is override that and then you can choose your image. I don't have a setup that I can find immediately, but this is exactly how you would do that. You would throw in, maybe I can find a really quick texture. Let's see how fast I can do this. I might just have to settle with just a normal, I mean, that's not going to look very interesting, but okay, let's just for the sake of it, just to show you how you can get the material, the backplate in. So I'm going to throw this inside of here, and you can now see if I had my start IPR, and then we can choose a cube. So of course this doesn't match at all, but hopefully it shows you the process. So I'm just rotating my camera around now. So then I'd want to match that like focal length as well to make sure all of this matches. And then we can choose different options for framing our backplate, as well as different offset options as well. So hopefully that answers how you can throw in a backplate inside of Redshift. Pretty much grab your camera, go to your background, and this is your backplate options. Cool. So just having a quick look through. There are some new comments. Okay, so this is sort of like a part 2 to your question. I managed to load an image and the viewport looks distorted, but on the render view, it looks fine. Okay, so at the moment, the trouble is there isn't a like for like because the viewport is the Cinema 4D viewport, whereas the render view is Redshift's render view. So unfortunately, there is not a absolute like for like yet. It's getting there and it's being worked on, and sort of every new release we're getting closer to having an accurate viewport, but at the moment it isn't. It does look a little bit distorted, and yes, it should work with a image sequence. So if I drop down the image, we can see we also have animation. And then you can change this to simple or loop or ping pong. And then you can change it. You can add it in and then you can detect the frames and then it will detect that. We add some sort of image plane object. I unfortunately do not know the answer to that. This quick question just came through. I unfortunately do not know the answer to that, but I can suggest it to the dev team and see if it's something that they're either working on or something we're looking to have in the future. And the previous thing I just showed was, how we can add an image sequence to that. It's just inside of this little drop down. So normally you can't see this, but if we drop this down, we can add in our image sequence and detect our animation. Cool. So I'm just having a quick look through some of these final questions. I know we've sort of like run slightly over the 90-minute mark, but hey, there's lots of cool stuff to talk about and to show. So this question and this sort of questions are related to the same kind of thing. Yes, a Toon shader is on the roadmap. I was sort of discussing this earlier, that you can actually find the roadmap for Redshift is public. You just go on Trello and search for that, and you can see that there is a Toon shader being worked on. Yep, you are not the only ones asking for this. I personally am as well. And relating to the one previously, as far as I'm aware, no, Redshift won't read Sketch and Toon materials. If you still want to render Sketch and Toon, use the standard renderer. It's also super fast, so you wouldn't necessarily want to use Redshift for those materials until there is a proper Toon shader. But yeah, still use Sketch and Toon because it's super powerful and it is super, super fast. Cool. So just having a quick look through. Let me know if there's any other questions that maybe I've missed or you would like to know. Also, there is another sort of Ask Me Anything. So for anyone who doesn't know, we run a Ask the Trainer on the 2nd and 4th Thursday on the Maxon Trainer Team YouTube channel. And this Thursday, Noseman, or aka Thanasis, and Jonas, two of our incredible master trainers, are doing a Ask Me Anything. So if there's anything that I didn't get to or potentially questions that I don't know, then definitely come be part of that stream. I'll probably be on it anyway, just sort of like hanging out, learning from them like I do every day. There's a couple of questions that have come in about like recommendations for like a laptop or a PC or things like that. I always find it really hard to answer these questions because I use a Mac. I always have used a Mac. So I don't like to give recommendations because it's like personal preference. I also don't really know anything because I've never had like a PC. So I can't give advice on that necessarily. But I can tell you what I use. I use my whole streaming setup is on a laptop. It's an M1 Max MacBook Pro. And it does the job. It does the job. Like it works for me, especially because I go like last week, I was visiting London studios all week doing some sort of like demo sessions, answering questions. And so it's really great for me to be able to just pack it up and go and not have any kind of issues because it's the same machine I work on. I also do a lot of live events. So I get to go to these nice places and talk on behalf of Maxon. And so having my laptop work and be portable is perfect for me. I also have a Sense Labs tablet, so let me just sort of show you this. So again, this is what I use. I don't use a mouse. I use a Sense Labs tablet, and it works really well. I used the mouse for years and was like, I'll never get used to a tablet. And now I'm like, I'm never not using a tablet again. It's really perfect. And again, super portable. It's smaller than my laptop. So everything fits in a rucksack. I get on the train or I get on the plane, and I'm pretty much good to go. But there, I don't know if I can say too much yet. I might be talking about something PC related soon. That's pretty much all I can say on that. But yeah, stay tuned. I may be talking about some PC related things very, very soon. Cool. So I'm just having a quick look through. So this is a really cool question. So I haven't been able to dive into them in loads of detail because I've been, ever since the release, I've been pretty busy back to back with like studio visits and other training sessions, but I'm planning on diving more into them, and I'm going to be doing some more quick tips on all the new things. For example, looping Maxon noises and the distorter node. If there's anything in particular you would like to know about, then definitely just like drop me either an email or a message. I'm pretty active on Instagram. That's where I got all the suggestions for today's stream. It's just at It Was Elly. So, and that's where I'll be posting a lot of stuff. And on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel is where I talk about a lot of things. Cool. So I'm just flicking up on the questions. So this was back when we were talking about the state node. Would using a curvature node instead of using a state node result in a somewhat similar output? That is a very interesting question. I don't think so, because I think the curvature it's like the convex or the concave elements. A bit like, hey, let's see, shall we? Who knows? Maybe I'm just not sure. Let's grab a dome light quickly. That's super bright. And then let's just throw in the render view, and let's do that. Okay, so we're saying, could we use the curvature node instead of the state node? How could we pull that down? Maybe 0.1? Not necessarily. I don't think it's really going to work in the same way. Maybe if I go higher. Sort of. We're sort of getting that top, but it's not as easily controllable as we can see, because we only have like our mode and our radius options. No, it's not working the same way. Whereas what the state node is doing is it's taking the normals, and then we're splitting out the different axes to then create that gradient, whether it's the X, Y, or the Z. But the curvature node used for other reasons is so amazing. But it does depend on your geometry quite a lot. So you need to have like maybe a high resolution model that has some nice like convex or concave elements to then use the curvature, which we used on like the sushi in the first scene. Okay, so quick question on Cryptomap AOVs. Why is it exported as a separate file and not together in the multi-channel EXR file with other AOVs? So I think this is due to something called deep rendering. It has to be rendered as a separate direct output because it's unable to work with the multi-part EXR file. I don't know the technical reasons why, but I think it is something to do with what's called deep rendering. So it has to be used as a separate file, but you should be able to just import that into your software of choice, whether it is like After Effects or DaVinci Resolve, and then combine that with your multi-part EXR. But yeah, because you'll see when we go into our AOV manager and show AOVs, if we throw in, I don't know, like beauty and then Cryptomap, you'll see that it automatically is set to a direct output by default. Cool, right. So just having a final quick look through. So I think someone's already answered a question about the Vertex map to drive hair. So Bhavana, thank you for answering that question for me. I really appreciate that. Just diving in, making sure if there is any that I have missed though, because we're coming to sort of like the end of the stream, then definitely just hit me up again, or again, I'll be there on Thursday, and like on socials or on the training at maxon.net is a good email to get hold of us. Okay, so I'm now at the bottom of the screen. Let's have a quick look. Will backdrops be able to always register? Let's see. Just have a quick look through C4D liquid simulations. That's probably a suggestion for another day. It's possible, but not in the same way that it is in sort of like other DCCs, or using things like X particles to create like really nice fluid simulations. But hey, simulation, we've seen the improvements in Cinema 4D simulation system over the last like few releases. So it fills me with a lot of confidence and what's to come next. All right, cool. So one final one. Let's have a look. What's the fastest way to render puzzle maps? Usually I forget some, and it takes longer to render simple map compared to standard Cinema 4D. So the fastest way to render puzzle maps, I guess it depends whether you're in standard Cinema 4D or whether you're in Redshift. So I just render them inside of my AOV manager. I create my puzzle map, and then it depends if you want to do it on a material ID or if you want to do it on an object ID. For me, I can do an object ID. Then let's just for the sake of this, let's add a couple of quick elements. So we've got our sphere, our cube, and then we would have our cylinder. And then we can choose object IDs for our different red, green, or blue like mats. So I can go 1, 2, and 3. And then I need to then define the ID on my different objects. So I set the ID that's relating to the object to relate to the particular channel. And let's just copy and paste this for speed. Change these to the different options. And then we should be able to go to puzzle map and bucket render. So I would just do them inside of Redshift this way. That is the fastest way that I'm aware of. If you're working with Redshift, that is. Cool. So I hope that helps answer all of those questions. And again, to everyone who gave me suggestions a couple of weeks ago for this live stream, it was so much fun sort of breaking those down and figuring out those answers. Hopefully they're really helpful. More than happy to share any of the project files or the scenes, the shaders for this. Maybe I'll just put together like a whole Dropbox folder and throw everything on. But if there's something specifically that I did here that you want to know or you'd like the file for, then just let me know. Then that is totally cool. Again, keep your suggestions coming because this is so much fun. I enjoy figuring out and problem solving how to create things, especially materials. Those of you that have seen any of my training sessions before will probably know that they're my favorite thing to talk about, pretty much, Redshift materials. So yeah, as always, it has been a pleasure. And don't forget to check out the Maxon events page for anything that we have coming up. So we have a bunch of other training sessions. So again, the final of the demystifying post-production. Oh, also on this topic, here's a little spoiler for those of you that are still here. Next month's demystifying series is myself, Ian Robinson, and some of the Adobe Substance team, and we're going to be doing Adobe Substance workflows into ZBrush, Cinema 4D, and Redshift. It's not on the events page just yet, but I believe it will be either the end of this week or early next week for you. And I know I've been talking about Substance quite a lot and talking about the fact we're going to be doing streams on it. So yes, June, demystifying every Monday in June, we're all going to be covering some Substance workflows. So yeah, definitely check out the events page. And as we said, anything that I didn't get to today or anything that you'd love to know to ask the absolute total experts, then on Thursday we have that Ask the Trainer, Ask Me Anything special. And they'll be more than happy to answer all of your wonderful questions. So as always, it has been a pleasure. I will see you all on another stream very soon. Thank you for all of your amazing questions, and thank you for just being here and hanging out. I always appreciate it. So have a good one. Have a great rest of your days and have a good week. And I will speak to you all soon. Bye, everyone.